Hello and welcome to the Web of Light Special Edition. We are your host and hostess. I am here with
Angie,
and I am Dr. Kevin. And this is Belfry, who will be assisting us today. How are you today, Belfry? Well, I'm hanging out with some bats. Good for you. This is our Dr. Kevin and Angie Talk Ghosts. Well, but Belfry, what's wrong? What do you mean you're afraid of ghosts? You're a bat. You should like a ghost. They're what? What'd you say? Belfry, no nibbling during the show. So, Belfry wants to know, what was your first ghost story?
Oh, you're going to start with me, huh? Oh, the fun begins. Actually going to start my first ghost story out when I was young.
Well, that would probably be when a first ghost story happened.
That's right. I was just a little child, and I walked into my bedroom, and there it came out as soon as I got myself settled into bed. A shadow person. The shadow person came and went all the way around the room and into my little closet. And at that time, I was kind of a little freaked out, so I was a little kid, and I went and hid underneath my covers. However, it wasn't the first time the shadow person came around. So, as this progressed, and I got to see him more and more times, I started to say, "Go away, leave me alone." And guess what? He left.
Well,
What was your first experience?
well, we just want to know, did you help him out of the closet?
I don't believe so.
So, my first ghost story. And again, it's how you define ghost. Because many would say, I would be one of them, that what I'm getting ready to tell you is not actually a ghost story. When I was 8, my grandmother died. And she was the one that told me when I was 4 about being psychic and how I had a gift, and it was a gift from God. Well, when she died, I was in my bed, and she came to the end of my bed, and she was standing there. Now, I knew it wasn't her in flesh, but she was standing there, and she just told me that she had passed on. But because I still needed her, she would still be there for me. Now, some would say that that was not a ghost story because she was not a ghost, depending on how you define ghost. So, the fun begins. So, how would you define ghosts?
Well, there's a few definitions to a ghost.
Okay.
Because all ghosts are spirit. And some ghosts are there because they're called to be there. And other ghosts are there because they tormented themselves to stay there.
See, and I differentiated a bit.
I kind of figured you did.
See, I look at ghost as that I break ghost out as those that are trapped spirits, those that can't move on. Because then you have your poltergeist, and of course poltergeist is a German word meaning to make noise. But a poltergeist is for me, not a ghost, because the poltergeist can stop at any time. So if there is someone who is willfully making a choice to stay, then they're not trapped. So that's how I break it down. Now, how do you define a ghost? Because Angie has one way, I have another. Mm-hmm. Neither of us is wrong. It's just defining the language when we use it. When Angie uses ghost, she refers to any spirits that may be visiting, and I only refer to trapped souls. One thing we both agree on is that you can also have something that's called the energy in the walls. Energy that's so powerful.
Yeah, you can find that in all kinds of places.
Yeah. That the walls are literally alive with the energy of a single event or a series of events, where that emotion just went into the wall, drop by drop, like water, until it lives on. And if you are a sensitive, then you can read that energy. You can read those emotions. You can even, depending on what kind of psychic ability you have, you can even watch, hear, and experience the tale that the walls had to tell. Where was the most powerful place that you ever picked up energy in the walls?
Oh, there's been several. One of my biggest was when somebody had a suicide. So in that, there were actually two. One is, I guess, a sad one because it was a suicide. And so, of course, the walls reeked of that suicide and the anguish that the family went through. However, there's another space that we went into where we knew this lady who had this beautiful laughter, and the children in the neighborhood would always go to her house to hear her laugh, and just to giggle because it was a wonderful laugh. And when she passed, her laugh stayed in the walls. The laughter, actually, people who moved in actually heard the laughter. That is my special one, though, because I love the idea that it was something that was embraced as fun and good-spirited.
Well, I had a couple of different energy in the walls that I'll share. One was the energy in the walls that there was a man who had lived in this place, and what had happened was he didn't know that his wife was into the black arts, and she would do ritual and ceremony in their house when he was out working as a postal worker. And so one day there was an emergency, and this was during the beginning of World War II, and he left to go home and discovered his wife practicing the black arts, and not alone. The wife did not survive the discovery, is all I'll say. And then he proceeded to hang himself in the house. So when early on, we would pick up the energy of her, and we would pick up the energy of the anger, and we would pick up the energy all laced in. It wasn't until later on that we realized there was energy in the wall, and the man hanging in the hallway had remained as a ghost. But it started with the energy in the walls. And I had such extensive experience with this because I had moved into the place, not knowing. So we had to clear the energy out of the walls. We had to find her secret hiding place where she kept all of her black arts. We literally, and we didn't own the place. I was there with roommates. We went to a place where I felt all of this energy and this heat, and we had to pry up floorboards to find where she had hid the stuff in under the floorboards, and that energy had stayed there for 30 years. And then he became quite angry. Became quite angry with us, my two roommates and I. And we would all leave the apartment together, and we would come back together. And at the time, I collected unicorns. And we came back on more than one occasion to find one of my unicorns hanging in a hangman's noose somewhere in the house. Now, no one else had keys. There was just me and my two roommates, and we would leave together, and we would go away for the day, and we'd come back, and there on a light chain or on a chandelier or somewhere would be hanging one of my unicorns. And then one night we had a party, and we had a bunch of people sitting at the table. And more of the information I was getting psychically, and I was uncovering it. And this was before I was working professionally doing this work. But the gifts had always been there. You know how that is.
Yeah.
We're at the dinner party, and we're telling the story of George and what we could find out, and some of why George was still there and what he was angry about. And in the middle of saying something, I started to not be able to breathe. I couldn't breathe. And I started grabbing for my throat because I couldn't breathe. And then the next thing I knew, I was falling backwards in my chair. I fell to the floor in my chair at the table, and people rushed up to come see if I was okay. One of the girls visiting screamed because I had marks, finger marks, on my throat. So we left shortly after that. We left George. We cleared the energy from the walls, and we cleared her energy. But George didn't want to go.
He was stuck.
He was stuck. And this was a long, I was at a different point in my life. One of my roommates, actually, a few years later, had to go deliver a pizza.
To the address.
To the address. And when she delivered the pizza, and she turned and she started to walk away, she heard her name called, and she looked up, and she saw the silhouette of George looking down at the window. One of my two roommates also reminded George of his wife.
Oh,
Yes.
I see.
Yes. And I suspect in some twisted reality, I was the paramour that was practicing the black arts with his wife.
More than likely, that was so.
Yeah. So, but that was an energy in the wall. It's okay. Fell free. You don't have to be scared. None of these are going to hurt you. Yet. So, and then my other energy in the wall was like yours, quite delightful. Somebody brought me over to clear out this house because they thought that their grandmother must be trapped because they kept on seeing images of her. And when I went, I knew that there was no spirit that was trapped there, but I could see the image of her sitting in the rocking chair that she sat in by a fireplace. And upon talking, learned that this was the third generation that this house had been in the family. that she had been born and rocked by that fireplace.
Fireplace.
She was raised in that fireplace. She had, by that fireplace, there was always a rocking chair of some kind by the fireplace in this house. She went on to inherit the house and raised her own children there and held grandchildren there, and all the way till the day she died. And the reason why the granddaughter who owned the house now could still see her grandmother rocking was because her grandmother left so much love behind that as long as a member of that family owned it, she had left a piece of herself behind, not a ghost, but just the energy of love, the energy of nurturing, the energy of family. In those walls, in that rocking chair, in the very stones of the fireplace.
Mm-hmm.
So, tell us another ghost story.
We're actually going to share one that was a little bit it's a bit frightening for those that were with me. Yeah, I know. It's going to have to hide on this one.
It's okay, Belfry, we'll take care of you.
And I actually use this story for people who give thought to utilizing intuitive abilities without practicing protection.
Unsafe spiritual? Oh my, do tell.
Yeah, so I was called to this home just to have dinner. I wasn't even working at that point. I was just being a guest. And there were 3 other people. And as we were sitting, the hostess, had asked to be connected to her deceased mother. At that time, I was a naive,
No,
beginning spiritual connector.
we've all been there.
And I did put some protection around me, as I did all the time. However, there were 3 other people there. And I was not really anticipating when somebody asks, and this is a lesson to be learned, of course, when somebody asks to connect to a spiritual relative that they appear that they want to be connected to, don't ever take it as it's a positive experience. Always ask first. So I opened my spiritual opening for connecting with this mother. And I will seriously, honestly say to you that the first thing that I felt was like somebody was just swooning, like this cape. It was swooning over me.
Mm.
And as soon as I felt that, I knew that there was something not that nice coming into the room. And everything in there turned ice cold. And I had to keep reminding the girls that were with me to ask for protection, not to be afraid, ask for protection. And just as your story kind of reminded me of this, because the next thing I knew, I felt the energy pull through the door, immediately went to the host, and she started gasping. And I ended up having to release the energy because it was still going to try to take her out, because her mother always had a vengeance on her, unknown to myself. And so here we were opening the gateways for this spirit to come back and reenact what it did several times with her, which was torment her. I think the hairs were standing up on everybody's arms. The room was ice cold.
Belfry has a question.
And
for
that
you.
was my learning experience.
I had one of those. I'll tell in a minute. But Belfry has a question.
Yeah?
Okay, I'll ask
Yes,
for you.
Belfry.
He wants to know, did she come with wire hangers?
No, but she came with some very menacing energy.
Yes, and they can come that way. I have a couple of menacing stories. Which one should I tell, Belfry? Let me see. If I only had a brain. I guess I do. So, I'm going to talk about something that also was technically not a ghost story, but I want to have it as a teaching lesson so Belfry does not get in trouble. Yes, you, Belfry. So I was teaching a ghost class, because you know I teach a ghost class,
Yes.
which actually is now out on DVD, just saying. But I teach a ghost class. And in teaching it, I had several of the students say that they really wanted to go on a ghost clearing with me. And normally I would never take a ghost class and take them on a clearing. First of all, you never know when ghost clearings are going to come up. If I'm going to be moving somebody over to the other side, I mean, it happens when it happens. I can't coordinate it. It's not like I can go, okay, I have a class this Tuesday. Can we make sure that somebody needs to be cleared up, shows up, comes, knocks on my door or something? You know, it just doesn't work that way. But on this particular ghost class, I had a ghost clearing that I was scheduled to do. And so doing the ghost clearing, since I had one scheduled to go do, I told the class that if they wanted to come, that they could come. So this ghost class decided, so there was 6 or 7 students that said they wanted to come and learn how to do a ghost clearing. So I said, okay. So I was going to somebody's house to do this ghost clearing. And one of the things that happened was, first of all, we got there. And I did shielding with them and did protection and said to stay behind me. And, you know, that sometimes you saw nothing. Sometimes you only felt things. Sometimes you heard something. Sometimes you didn't hear something. Sometimes you could never tell. It's always different when you do a ghost clearing. But in this particular time, it was very tangible indeed. So we go into this house. I'll just say somewhere in Georgia.
Uh-huh.
And we go into this house.
Was it day or night?
It was day.
Okay.
Went in the day. Went in the, I think it was the early afternoon. So we go into the house, and the very first thing is that, you know, everyone could feel the energy, and it was just angry energy. Now, the people that lived there weren't there, but you could just feel the angry energy. And my students started talking about how they could feel the angry energy. You walked in and it made you want to kind of like protect yourself, things like this. And so then the next thing is, we look up, and there is this, you know, it was supposed to be probably from the 50s. It was a little Hawaiian hula dancer that was just sitting on a shelf. But there was something as if the face had been painted just a little scary. And we looked up and we watched as the hula dancer danced across the mantelpiece for us.
Oh, yay.
And the look was not a good one on that face of that hula dancer. So I lost about half the class at that point. I lost 3 or 4 of them. Was like, I'm out of here. They didn't like the feeling. They didn't like the actual physical manifestation of the hula dancer. So I'm walking around the house asking everybody else, what else did they get? What did they get? They could feel the anger. They could feel hate. They could feel all of these different negative emotions. And then we go out, and I'm standing at the top of the stair, and I'm just standing there, and I turn their back. I'm not moving. And you could just feel this rush of energy, and I got pushed down the stairs. And I got up. And of course, I was not happy. And I informed the spirit that that behavior was not acceptable. Mm-hmm. I knew that at that point we weren't dealing with a ghost. The energy was very strong. And in that moment, I lost the other half of the class. The rest of them were all out of there. Thankfully, they all took their own cars. And so now it's just me, the house, and this woman. It was clearly a mother. Again, the mother. And so as I walk around and I realize that this isn't actually a ghost. This is somebody who's chosen not to cross over. So therefore, in my definition, not a ghost. But somebody that was in the process of trying to take possession of one of the two owners of the house. And her story unfolded in my head. And that this had been her house, and she had raised her only son in this house. And when her husband died, her only son and a woman that she detested moved into the house to take care of her. And then she was forced into a in-law apartment where she died. But she never forgave her son for marrying the woman. She always blamed the woman for taking her son away. She felt like she had lost her house, and she had lost control. And in her dying thoughts, she was going to take her house back. The man that was living there reminded her of her son. And so he'd been doing more and more strange behavior, and the wife had called me in. And at one point, I realized that now I want the audience, yes, you, to pay attention here. Because the son was a spiritual thrill seeker. He had gone long and far to have different spiritual thrills in his life. He was always pushing the boundaries. He always wanted the next spiritual adventure. And he didn't shield and he didn't protect because that, like somebody else we know, blunts the adventure.
Yes.
So he returns to the house, him and I are in the house, and he literally, as I'm talking to her and trying to drive her out of the house and to get her to continue her soul journey, though again, she's not trapped, and he literally picked up the biggest cleaver knife in the kitchen I've ever seen and chased me out the door with it, chased me into the car with it. And there was nothing I could do. I tried to do some stuff remotely, but he just continued to get worse because he had his ultimate last spiritual thrill, which is he got possessed.
Yeah.
And it is one of those sad but true stories. Within weeks, just before the possession completely took hold, he killed himself. He had a moment of clarity and realized that this was his last greatest spiritual thrill. So again, lessons. Be careful what you ask for. Be careful to set parameters and boundaries. Make sure you know what you do, because just as ghosts are real, so are those things that if you invite them in, will take over your life. Do you have another
I've
ghost?
seen many of those
Yes.
happen.
Do you have another ghost story for
Oh,
us?
of course I do. I could go on and on and on with ghost stories.
As could I.
As could you.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have one that was rather an interesting feat because just so that, and I'm sharing this one so people can understand that, they don't always, ghosts or entities are true spirits. They're free. That means that they don't always have to be attached to a house or the walls. They can be attached to a certain property.
They could be attached to a property. They could be attached to a person.
They can be attached to
A thing.
a thing. This particular piece was one where I was actually called in because somebody felt a lot of remorse feeling when they were up and they were getting pushed down the stairs a little bit. And I had to research it. And I do recall when I first came to this, which kind of made me not really chuckle. I was a little infuriated, but chuckled too. When I first appeared at this home to check it out, there were uncles and cousins, and they were having a party. They were waiting for me to come in and check out the ghost. And at that point, I kind of had to kindly tell the owner of the home that I would be back in another day or so. She could make an appointment and that no one was to be here. This was not a social party to be played. And so, I went back and had the owner on her own. And I went upstairs, and the energy on the stairs and up into the second floor. This house looked over it actually looked over an area that used to be a field. And when I looked out through, to get my sense of what was going on in here, all I saw was a horse in a corral. I was looking at or envisioned what was there in the past. And I was looking through the eyes of this little girl. And it was a little girl that was stuck there because there was also a male entity who always embraced her, always made her go to her room. It was a feeling of being anguished by this other spirit. And the parents, there had been some tragedy in the home. However, the little girl, because she had been always pushed into going into this room as a punishment, this other entity was much stronger and very negative. So I kind of was wanting to, I tried releasing her, but she was too afraid. So I ended up actually working with my divine energies and putting a protection shield around that room that she was in. And at that point, she became much more, I should say, less hesitant to move forward. And as I was doing this, the lady of the house was like, well, aren't you getting rid of him? And I said, yeah, he's going to be gone, but until I soothe this girl, he empowers himself through her energies and yours because of the fear that they all are showing. Oh no, you can't take the little girl away. She always keeps me company in my bedroom, was the response I received. I said, so you're very aware of her? And she's, oh, most definitely, and I love having her here, and you can't take her away. And I just looked at her and said, she's not a pet. She's a being who is stuck here on this earth plane, and it's time for her to be released and move forward. She came so close to throwing me out of her home. So close. I actually had to fight over this, but the little girl was released, and then I cleared the other energy. But that's another piece that I want to share with people. Ghost entities are not pets. They're a spirit just as you are, and they deserve not to be held back in a condition that they really shouldn't be in. Do you agree?
Oh, you know this is one of, here's the sound of Dr. Kevin getting up on his soapbox. Here it's, there it is. Which is why I always talk about ghosts being trapped souls. And when you come across a trapped soul, and this is my problem with the big thing about these ghost hunting tours, where they will find ghosts. And a lot of times what they're finding is energy in the walls.
Energy in the walls.
And they're finding memories that have become tangible to the sensitives. And they're not true spirits that are trapped out of their incarnational cycle. But I have talked to ghost hunters before and said, well, you know, if you find a soul that's trapped, are you releasing it? And they're going, well, no, because, you know, we bring people back to see them. And I'm like, this was a person that walked on the earth plane. This is somebody who will walk on the earth plane again at some point. This is like saying, you know, it was like the old days when they used to, you know, have the oddities that would go in the traveling, you know, in the traveling show, and they would have the, you know, the bearded woman, and they would have the Siamese twins, and they would have all these oddities, only at least they got paid, they got food. These ghosts are just treated like something in a cage when somebody has the key and could let them out so that somebody can make a few shekels. And I think my very balanced thing is I look forward to some of these people who profit off keeping souls trapped so that they can make a few shekels, to enjoy the lifetime where they become trapped as a soul and see what it's like to have other people look at them and walk by them and say, yes, can you feel them? Can you feel their pain? Can you feel their fear? Can you feel their anger?
Mm-hmm. You know, you're bringing this up, and it makes me think of another part of that, too. There was one time when I knew of a ghost. He was never able to come back to his home. When he was 16, he had to leave because he was falsely accused of something, and in order to not be put through the justice system, he actually had to leave. So the family brushed him off to another area. And years later, in his 20s, he was actually killed in the area that he was in. And he returned to his home because his home was where he always wanted to be. And I've actually dealt with this for a couple of years. And he would get very, how can I say it? He was very controlling because he finally got back to his home, and as a spirit, he didn't want anybody coming into his area, his areas where he would sit and listen to his radio, or he would sit and just be there and ponder his own self, to the point where he would actually change stations on a radio for those that were living there. He would actually push people downstairs because they weren't supposed to be there. And so I actually, knowing that I needed a little bit more help, I brought this up to a priest to see if I could have something done in that way. And I was just lost on the acknowledgement that I received. because what I was told is that, oh no, you just leave those alone. The time will come when they can finally get released, but until then, you just leave them there. And I just totally disagreed, because that could be forever, and you're not only holding this person back from their spiritual growth, you're also enabling that home to get worse and worse in that energy.
Well, I think you have to look at the fact that the church has definitely changed its view on things like exorcism and the clearing of spirits, and it went through a period where that was an acceptable behavior for a priest, and then there was a time when it wasn't an acceptable behavior for a priest. And because someone became a priest doesn't mean that they know how to clear a troubled soul. And of course, one of the things I want to point out to the audience that I have always said is the priest would have been useless unless the guy was Catholic. Because, if you let's say for some reason I've cleared Native American souls. If I bring holy water and start throwing it at them, they're going to think that I'm just, trying to make it rain, because it has nothing, it has no meaning to their soul.
Right.
If I sage somebody who died a devout Catholic, then they're just going to think that I'm, burning stinky incense. It's not going to have meaning to them. These souls lived and walked and had belief systems, and oftentimes it is their belief system that traps them. I can't tell you how many souls that I have moved along the way where the biggest block was they were afraid that because of something that they were told in their upbringing by their minister or priest or rabbi or whatever, that they were going to go to hell, and they were afraid to pass into their soul evolution. They died in fear of an eternity in hell. They died with great guilt. And so, I've had times where I get a message, and you and I have discussed this before, I do not like crucifixes. I love crosses. I've always been drawn to crosses, even though I'm not Christian, nor was I ever raised Christian. But I can't stand crucifixes, and yet there was a time period when I got a very clear message. I needed to get one, that I needed to have one. It needed to be one of those ones that you take out and it stands up and it has the thing for the holy water and the candles. And there have been a few exorcisms that I have had to do, and or ghost clearings, where I had to use that particular vehicle, because I had to speak a language that the soul heard. Nothing has an overall magical property.
No.
Sage does not clear everything. Sorry.
No.
Holy water does not clear everything. Sorry. We are given free will choice. We're given a diversity of religious belief systems and ideologies that we commit to in a lifetime. We are held accountable when we leave a lifetime by what we said we believed. Did we actually walk the path that we proclaimed was the path that we believed in? It is not what we believe in, it's our integrity to it that makes the difference. And people don't understand that.
That is so true, though. It's true.
And, and if you have a spiritual transformational moment in a lifetime, then that's part of your journey. And then you can go and you can have, you started your life in one belief system and you ended it in another. There's still going to be that message of when you died, it's integrity. And as far as Judgment Day, the only judging source is self, your higher soul, and what you agreed to do, and what your soul contracts were, who you came in here to be, and you cannot hide from yourself. I mean, if you have a different God, that's fine. Enjoy the God you have. I don't have a God that wastes their time running around judging somebody because they ate something on a wrong day, or they mispronounced something, or they had a thought, or they had a bad moment and said an unkind word. Really? God's that trivial? Well, not my God's not. If your God is, I think you might want to upgrade, but that's up to you. So, I've been trying to think, because you set me up for 3 or 4 different ghost stories to tell. And this is us talking ghost stories. Yes, I know. I'm going to tell the story of my first ghost clearing. I was 18 at the time. And though I had had several interactions, I had a reaction with my grandmother when I was 8. And then when I was 9 or 10, I met the ghost that was living in our house, and her and I had an ongoing, relationship until I moved from that place. I went back and cleared her as an adult when I figured out what to do. But she used to come and visit me and talk to me, and she was definitely a trapped soul. But when I was 18, maybe 19, and I was in college, and I had a woman come to me, and she said, very quietly, she goes, I know you're into all that stuff. I said, uh-huh. She goes, I need help. And I said, okay, what do you need? Well, when my parents died, I inherited their house, and I rent it out, and it's important for me to get the income from renting it out to stay in college. And I said, okay. She goes, well, now I just want you to know, I don't believe in any of this. I was raised a good Catholic girl. I don't believe in any of this. But I've had 3 tenants now, in the time that I've owned it, that have all left mid-lease because they say the place is haunted. And though they never met each other, they're describing some of the same things happening in the house. And, the last one, and this was several years ago, so she initially wasn't getting first month, last month's rent, stuff like that. I mean, that they used to not do that as a regular thing, and she was a first-time home-owning renter, that was a property owner. And so the first 2, she just took the loss. The third one, she got a security deposit and had a signed lease. And when she said that she would take them to court for it, they said that they would countersue her because she knew the house was haunted and she didn't warn them. And so she asked me if I could do anything. So I did what I used to do in those days. I got very quiet and I said, can I do this? And I heard yes. I said, yeah, I can do this. I can help. She goes, well, will you? I went, do you want me to do this? Okay, yes, I'm supposed to do it. So I'll be there. We set up a time on Sunday. And then my mentor of mine at the time, I called and I said, Fran, I'm going to go clear a haunted house on Sunday. Are you doing anything? She was, you can't just go clear a haunted house. Don't you know there's all sorts of things and you should do this and it could be dangerous and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, look, Spirit said I could do it and I'm supposed to. So you want to go or not? And she came. So the first thing is I wanted to walk around the house. And so I walked around the house, and as we got to this door that was all grown over, and it was a door into the basement, I went up to the door, and I was like, I just kept feeling the energy. And there was just something there. But she goes, well, you can't go in and out of that door. It's been rusted shut for years. It's not been ever opened in the memory of her lifetime. And so when I finally just stood there for a second, and I knew I could feel something. And there's Fran, and there's this woman, and the door opens up. I'm not even touching it. It invites me into the basement. Well, at that point, she almost fell down running up the hill to get back into her car to leave, to say that she would see me in school on Monday with the details. And so, but I didn't feel like we should go into the basement. So we went around and went in the front door. And one of the problem areas I'd already been told was it was the door to the basement. And in fact, the last family that was there, the door would keep on opening. And the woman kept on, yelling at her two, late teenage sons and her husband about, keep this door closed, keep this door closed. And then she tried doing a couple of things and it would still open up and there'd be a sound of footsteps on the stairs and all of these things were going on. And she started becoming frightened of it. And it got to the point where she had, because there was nothing down in the basement that they needed, she had her two sons move a big old hutch in front of the door to the basement so it couldn't open. Mm-hmm. And when she came home down the next day and the hutch was moved and the door was moved, and the husband or the sons clearly did not do it because she was hysterical to all of them on it. They literally packed their bags and left the house in the middle of the day. They were out of there. So time-wise, I'm going to have to keep this story short. So going into the house, there was two ghosts and one spirit that was staying because of the two ghosts. And all I'm going to say about these is there was an accidental murder. Mm-hmm. There was guilt. There was fear. And I only cleared one that needed to be cleared. And then there was a second that went when the first one cleared. But the accidental murderer, I refused to clear because I was young and I was foolish and I was angry about how this man had, in anger, it was an accident, but in anger, had murdered his son, mm-hmm. his own son. That spirit chased me for a month until I went back and cleared it. For a month, it haunted my dreams. Mm-hmm. For days, I had high fevers after I left. And it kept on sending me the same dream over and over and over again. And it was a dream where, in the dream, he killed me. And once I went back and cleared him, the dream went away.
Well done, yeah.
Now, there's a lot more to this story, and you can find it on my Ghost DVD. Or I will be speaking at Celebrate Samhain on October 15th, which is a Saturday. It's been a long-standing event. And I'm going to be speaking more on ghosts. What are ghosts, what are not ghosts, how to not become a ghost, and telling more ghost stories. But we're getting ready to wind down. We want to thank you. We do have many classes coming up. Feel free to go to weboflight.com and you'll find our calendar and all the different things that we are offering at the Wolf Healing Center. Closing thoughts?
I think we've pretty much covered the ghost stories.
There are ghosts. There are energies on the wall. There are poltergeists. And there are entities that will, if invited in, be worse than your worst house guest, because they will never leave until they take you out the door with them. Namaste.